Welcome to Epik Fails of History, the podcast that delves into the most epic fails of, history. I'm your host, Erik Slader. Today I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Carroll. Today's episode is on the dumbest moments in history that you've probably never heard of.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
Epik Fails of History.
Never underestimate the power of human stupidity. Robert A. Heinlein.
So I'm here with my co-host, Chris Carroll. Today we're talking about the dumbest moments in history.
Yeah, we got some good ones, too. From head-scratchingly stupid to world-changingly horribly stupid.
So up first we got Abel Tasman.
Yeah, Abel Tasman was a 17th century explorer. He was a Dutch merchant, and he was sailing for the Dutch East India Trading Company. He was the first to discover Tasmania, New Zealand, and the Fiji Islands, but somehow completely went all the way around Australia, without noticing it on his first voyage. It wasn't until his second voyage that Tasman realized he'd missed an entire continent. So I don't know how this dude isn't brought up more in
It's pretty crazy.
the annals of history.
I mean, if you look at the map, there's a chart of where he went, and it's just ridiculous. Like, he just went right around it. Like, he was avoiding it.
I mean, I've been lost driving around and driven around my destination, but it's usually like, oh, I missed that store or that house.
Yeah.
Not Australia. Who was up in his crow's nest? Stevie Wonder? I don't understand how you could miss something that massive. It's some of the worst navigation I've ever heard of. Since what? Columbus.
We'll get to him.
Yeah.
So up next we got this guy, Gianni Caproni. In 1921, aviation pioneer Gianni Caproni tried to create a flying boat. It was so he put together this 9-wing, 8-engine, 30-foot high, 77-foot long boat with a wingspan of 98 feet. It weighed 30,865 pounds.
Perfect for sailing and flight.
During its second test flight, soon after takeoff, the ridiculously expensive aircraft crashed into the water and completely broke apart.
Of course, it crashed into the water.
I mean, it wasn't great as a boat or an airplane.
What was his, I assume he wasn't the test pilot. What was his response to this? Did he have anything to say about it?
He was later quoted as saying, "The path of progress is strewn with suffering."
That's like something a Nazi would say. That's horrible. First of all, kudos to the, I presume, millionaire or richer, who's definitely insane. Like Howard Hughes, Spruce Moose level insane. A flying boat. It's not that it can't be done, because I'm sure there's planes that can float and there's all kinds of cool stuff. But I'm sure the right engineering team could make a pretty sweet flying boat. But it's why not necessary. It's like an aqua car. It sounds cool.
What gets me is they didn't start at smaller.
For
his test project. This thing's huge.
It's Noah's Ark, but it flies. I don't understand.
You can look up the image on Google. It's pretty ridiculous looking.
It's called the Capernissimo. You can get a view of this monstrosity. This dude Caproni, definitely the kind of insane rich person that makes me happy. I don't like the rich guy who hoards his wealth and tries to influence politics. I like the guy who's hey, I got $1 billion. What kind of crazy nonsense can I get into with this? And flying boat, I mean, that's got to be up there, right? That's awesome.
It's like a Bond gadget.
I mean, it's too bad that it probably killed some people when it crashed. Hopefully nobody was injured. And I love that it crashed into water, which is hilarious, but it's during its second test flight, which makes me wonder what happened during the first test flight.
Yeah.
And in that case, did it sail okay but not fly? Or was it just a disaster in both realms as opposed to...
I think it just had trouble taking off the first time.
Yeah, probably. And it weighs probably 25,000 pounds more than it possibly could.
Yeah,
still
exactly.
Fly. At this point in time. I don't know. But that's awesome. Flying boat for the win. Too bad it was a fail. So next up, we are going to talk about something true to my heart. The Great London Beer Flood of 1814. This is, you heard me right, beer flood. Maybe not as much fun as it sounds, but it sounds really fun. So anyway, on October 17th, 1814, You got London's Horseshoe Brewery. It's this massive, it's a big old brewery, and they got this massive vat, right? And the vat ruptures, which starts this chain reaction, ends up sending, get this, it's a tidal wave of 387,906 gallons just rushing down Tottenham Court Road, New Street, George Street, everything. All right, so it's parts of London that you're very familiar with is if you know what London looks like, even if you've never been there or anything, like if you've just seen like movies or whatever, areas that you recognize. Picture a tidal wave of beer flying down that street. Right, so the resulting wave of alcohol ends up destroying 2 houses, a pub, and it drowned or killed 8 people, including 5 people who were attending a wake.
It's kind of horrifying, actually.
That's pretty horrifying.
So, a related side note I should probably bring up, there was another event that was kind of similar, the Boston Molasses disaster. Have you heard about this one?
No, I haven't.
So, this one occurred on January 15, 1919, in Boston, Massachusetts. There was a 58-foot-high tank filled with 2.5 million gallons of molasses. It burst open. It drowned 21 people, injured 150 more, and completely destroyed both a fire department and a rail line.
Okay, so many questions spring to mind here, right? First of all, isn't the phrase, like, slow as molasses a thing? So...
Not when it's 2.5 million gallons of the stuff.
That's my other question. Why in the hell was there that much of anything? Unless it's water.
Yeah.
Right? Like 2.5 million gallons.
Yeah.
That's like Shamu's tank probably. I don't know the exact number, so I may be like way underestimating or overestimating that number. But
yeah.
I feel like that could fill multiple Shamu tanks.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. But that's a lot. That is a lot of molasses, right? And of course it's in Boston. So everything now smells like baked beans and molasses and racism.
I'm just picturing Shamu like
flapping around
in a molasses tank.
Yeah, it's insane though. I mean, you got to think about like you've got natural disasters, car accidents, disease, just regular accidents, all kinds of horrible ways that people can die.
Right.
You don't expect beer flood or molasses disaster to be on there. It's like, oh, did you hear Frank died? Oh man, that's too bad. What happened? Oh, Eminem curse. Like what? It's crazy.
Yeah, man.
Speaking of beer, we're here in Jacksonville, Florida, where everybody's got one in their hand pretty much 90% of the time.
Right.
There's a fort here in Jacksonville which was founded by the French back in the 1500s called Fort Caroline.
Yeah, so in 1564, this was disputed as Spanish territory. Fort Caroline only lasted about a year because someone left the gate open. And during the middle of the night, the Spanish soldiers from St. Augustine, which is like right across the way, snuck in and slaughtered everyone inside.
So basically you've got this fort that's in enemy territory or disputed territory.
Yeah.
So you've got to know that at any time you could be in danger, or at least like there could be a threat of some kind of conflict. You would think that like at the very least you would lock the one thing that's keeping you safe from just being blitzkrieged in your sleep. But they're French, so, it's either surrender or die, I suppose. I'd like to talk about a really epic fail that really had a positive outcome. Normally when you think fail, you think like, somebody slipping and falling, or, a telegram being sent to the wrong person that caused some nonsense, or like an issue over power lines causing a world war. Something like that. That is an epic fail. This is a failure of epic proportions that actually didn't hurt anybody, and it's pretty cool. So get this. This guy, Alexander Fleming, he's a total slob, right? He's a scientist. And he is so disgusting that he's got all these petri dishes and everything that he had with bacteria on them that are everything's just so dirty that there's like mold and stuff growing on things, right?
Just
so it's
stacked in a corner.
Yeah, so it's like late September 1928, right? And he's looking at this disgusting lab and wondering why his mom hasn't come to clean it up or whatever. And he realizes that the petri dish is covered in this fungus, and that the mold, the fungus, had actually killed the bacteria he'd been studying. He kind of, probably slower than we would like to believe, made the connection. So he eventually makes this connection, right? Like he's got this mold and it kills the bacteria. And he revolutionizes the world of medicine. He originally called his miracle cure, and this goes to what a genius this idiot was, mold juice. But as you can imagine, that's not super catchy. So he renamed it penicillin. You're welcome, planet Earth. This sloppy, nasty dude, Alexander Fleming, saved most of your lives on accident.
So you've probably heard about the Library of Alexandria. Everyone's always talking about how it burned down.
Yeah.
It was like,
You know, back in like famous Roman times, there's the city of Alexandria, and they had it famously. It was a Greek, right?
it was an Egyptian city. It was started by Alexander the Great.
So the Greeks are famously known for knowledge or what have you, like forwarding like scientific thought or what have you.
Yeah.
So you've got this library full of one of a kind, irreplaceable texts from some of the greatest thinkers of their time. Yeah, it was, I guess, lost due to fire. I didn't know that. I knew that something happened to it, but I didn't know.
So here's the thing that I found interesting when I looked into it. There wasn't just one burning down of the Library of Alexandria. It happened at least 5 times throughout history.
So basically, this super important library is like the castle that dude in Monty Python. Oh, it fell over, so we built it again.
Yeah, in the bog.
It's like, were they building it on super flammable area or something? Like, I don't understand. They keep torches next to the dried manuscripts.
So Alexander the Great, he liked to name cities after himself. So there's actually more than one Alexandria.
Okay, I got
But the one we're talking about here is the one in Egypt, like where like Cleopatra ruled from, basically.
Okay, right.
Yeah. When Caesar was going to war with this guy named Pompey the Great, according to Plutarch in the Life of Caesar, quote, when the enemy endeavored to cut off his communication by sea, he was forced to divert that danger by setting fire to his own ships, which after burning the docks, thence spread on and destroyed the great library.
Oh my god. So all right, so these guys are trying to cut off his communication by sea. So in response to that, he burns his ships?
Yeah, he was kind of ruthless.
And the fire spreads to the docks, and the library is built by the sea, I'm presuming.
Yeah.
So the fire spreads from the dock to the library. So no, I'm confused. Please, and this is probably just not understanding. Caesar burned his own ships?
Yes. In 48 BCE.
Why? I don't understand. Is it like a temper tantrum? Like, well, if I can't use them, nobody can.
I think it was a tactic.
But what kind? It's like, sir, they've got radar where they're messing with our tank's communication system. Blow up the tanks. Like, it doesn't really make sense. I was just confused. I mean, if that's what happened, hey, who am I to argue with the guy who got a dressing named after him? But that seems like not the smartest military move, unless they were trying to make the enemy think they were dead or something.
It might have been one of the many decisions he made throughout his life that ended with him getting stabbed by like 50 dudes in togas.
Yeah, I can see that. If that's his military leadership, then yeah, I could definitely see that. We can attribute the loss. I presume this is the last time it burned down.
This is actually the first time it burned down.
Oh, okay. So really, this didn't matter in the long run because I guess it was the leading act.
Yeah.
Like, hey, this is what you're in store for, library. Yay! So Caesar's plan to burn down his own ships is bullshit, right? Speaking of we're going to talk about the Late Victorian Manure Crisis. In the late 1800s, the major cities of the world are all starting to run into kind of a similar problem. And that problem is the very real possibility of drowning in a sea of toxic horse. There were just so many horses and so many people crowded in together, and the horses have nowhere to go to the bathroom, obviously, so they're just pooping in the street. And it got to the point where you had to wade through poop, like ankle, I presume even knee-high in some places. Anyway, London alone, just London, had over 50,000 horses being used for transportation by around 1900. And each of those 50,000 horses produces around 15 to 35 pounds of manure every day. All right? Now, you think that's bad. New York City had like at least 100,000.
Oh, yeah.
So you think New York City's full of now? So, yeah, I mean, they're facing a very real possibility that they won't be able to safely live in these cities anymore.
Well, imagine this. I mean, there's skyscrapers at this time, but they don't have cars yet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a ton of people, and they have to get around.
Yes.
I mean, so
wading through poop streets isn't exactly ideal. So, luckily for everybody, you don't have to get like a poop scuba suit just yet, because Henry Ford came along, and he revolutionized the auto industry with his Model T car, making cars affordable and single-handedly saving civilization from certain doom at the hands of horse butt.
Next up is something called Tulip Mania. which started in 1593 when an ambassador from the Ottoman court of Solomon the Magnificent brought some flowers from Turkey to the Netherlands. This was a vibrant strand of tulip bulbs that soon became like really sought after for its, color and stuff.
Right, and also because I imagine there weren't a whole lot of them in the Netherlands at the time.
These flowers like really blew up. Like people are going crazy for them.
Yeah,
and
the Beanie Babies of flowers.
So fast forward a few years, and the Amsterdam Stock Exchange opens up. It starts trading among commoners, and
people are starting to get invested.
Yeah. So in response to the growing supply and demand over the rare flower, multiple tulip brokerages opened up for business.
So you have like a tulip store?
Yeah, I guess so.
People that buy and sell in tulips, like the value of tulips. So it's like a stock brokerage, but just for tulips.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's
like they specialize in tulips. That's really weird.
Yeah.
I got it.
And by 1634, the tulip bulbs began to sell at a premium all across Europe. It seemed as though the Dutch tulip market had like this bright future.
Right.
It was like Bitcoin.
Right, there's no way the bubble on tulips could ever burst, right? Like everyone's always going to crawl over their mom for the newest tulip. So I imagine that like the tulips, right, everybody's really excited about tulips, right? So as people start wanting more and more of them, the price starts going higher and higher.
It at first it doubled, then it tripled. Soon they were being sold at a 1,000% markup, and as their scarcity increased, of course, so did the demand.
Right.
Many figured if the tulips were so valuable, they could be resold to others at a higher rate. Problem was, the tulips weren't that valuable to begin with. Not by a long shot.
Yeah, they're flowers, man. They're not even, like, especially rare.
Get this. On February 5th, 1637, an auction took place in the town of Alkmaar to help raise money for orphans or something. A single tulip sold for 5,200 florins.
I assume florins are like $1. I mean, probably.
Roughly. I mean, there's inflation and stuff.
Right, but I don't mean value-wise, but I mean, like, that's their...
Yeah.
So we'll just Americanize it, dumb it down, say $5,200 for what, like the whole room or something?
For a flower, a single, like an actual tulip.
So for one flower, over $5,000.
Yeah, and that's in we're talking 17th century money here.
So that's like $50 million.
Yeah. Overnight, of course, the tulip bubble burst.
Right, of course it does. Because it's not a sound financial system.
Much like the mortgage crisis of 2007, Tulip Mania led to a countrywide financial meltdown.
Smooth.
It was so bad it affected all the countries around it. Like, Europe itself had, like, an economic crisis over this.
I just don't understand, like, how something so silly could be such a driving force. You know, like, I understand, like, coffee or bananas or something.
Yeah.
It's like a tangible, like, that's a source of food or fuel for the body or whatever. But tulip's like, oh, it's pretty.
You can't eat it.
Like, there's no, it doesn't have any real value. It's just, it's like, hey, I got these acorns.
Is it going to do a trick?
Not even that, because you can actually eat acorns, I guess. Like, it's like, hey, I got this pine straw. I got tons of pine straw. Like, throw money at this guy. I don't understand. So, I mean, I hope people didn't, like, besides investors, I hope there weren't, like, the commoners getting screwed over by this thing.
Well, that's the sad part. A lot of farmers were hoping to make a quick buck, so that's, like, all they planted.
Oh, so instead
and then they
they
became completely worthless overnight. One theory is that a random peasant guy just suddenly came to the realization that he'd sold his house for a flower and wanted a refund.
Yeah.
So that's, when the
and that could start
market
crashed. Kind of
crashed.
snapping too, like,
Like,
wait
a second.
These aren't worth anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, then they go like Springfield from The Simpsons and the whole town riots at the same time. Like, we were idiots.
Things got so bad at one point that the Dutch federal government stepped in and issued a proclamation in an attempt to stop the coming crisis.
Right. Did it work?
No.
Of course.
The city of Haarlem, not to be confused with the birthplace of hip-hop, intervened by setting up the Commissioners for Flower Affairs.
That's a great title.
The height of the tulip craze only lasted less than a year, but the effects of it were felt throughout the 17th century.
I hope they learned something from this. Like, moral of the story, man. Keep things in perspective. You know, don't put all your tulips in one basket. You got to be cautious of trends and stuff. People throw their money on dumb stuff. But above all else, for the love of all that is holy, do not trade your life savings for a flower.
So, for this topic, I actually reached out to the internet for some answers.
I'm sure we got some interesting answers.
There's actually a lot of good topics there. Some that we'll actually cover on future podcasts because they're just too much to go into.
Hey, good job, internet.
But this one comes from a guy called Shookum J on
J.
Reddit. It's the Anglo Zanzibar War.
Very interesting. All right, so the thing that's interesting about the Anglo Zanzibar War, if you can even call it that, is the entire war took about 45 minutes from beginning to end and ended in the complete decimation of one side.
It's kind of sad, really.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous, but we're gonna let Shookum J explain. These are his words, but just as Shookum puts it, Zanzibar is a little island off the east coast of Africa. Back in the 1800s, the British and Germans were fighting for territory in Africa, and Zanzibar was one of the countries caught in the mix. Fighting had broken out between the Germans and the Zanzibaris. And so the British stepped in to help Zanzibar, and in return, the Sultan of Zanzibar declared his land a protectorate of Great Britain. Zanzibar was allowed a certain level of autonomy, but one of the key points of the agreement was that the British got veto power over the appointment of any new sultans. So we jump ahead to 1896. The old sultan, Hamad bin Tuwani, and I apologize if I mispronounced that, had passed away. So there were rumors that his nephew, Khalid bin Bargash, may have had him assassinated. And before anyone has a chance to act, Khalid moves into the palace and declares himself the new sultan. So the British sent emissaries to Khalid and told him that he did not have their backing, that they had not approved his ascension, and that he should step aside and allow Hamoud bin Muhammad to take the throne. Khalid kicked them out of the palace. So the British amassed a naval squadron in the harbor. They had 3 cruisers, 2 gunboats, and landed 1,000 Royal Marines. And they gave this would-be sultan an ultimatum. Either you vacate the throne by 9 a.m. on August 27th, or be destroyed. And Khalid had fortified the palace and positioned some machine guns and old cannons, and positioned around 3,000 soldiers to defend the palace. So on the morning of the 27th, the British received a message from Khalid saying, "We have no intention of hauling down our flag, and we do not believe you would open fire on us." At 9 o'clock exactly, the British warships opened fire. And so the opening volley destroyed the cannons defending the palace. High explosive rounds rained down on the palace, and the defenders are thrown into chaos. The palace begins to crumble and caught fire. The shelling stopped at 9:40 when Khalid's flag was cut down, and the British Marines stormed the palace. All told, the ships had fired 500 shells, 4,000 machine gun rounds, killing 500 of the defenders. The only British casualty was a single wounded soldier. The entire war had lasted only about 45 minutes, going down as the shortest war in history.
Damn.
So I would say that Khalid is the owner of one of the biggest, most epic fails in the history of history.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
It's just essentially put his middle finger in the British Royal Navy's face.
Yeah.
At a time when that still meant, it's like flipping off the Marine Corps. Like,
Right.
it's kicking in SEAL Team 6's door in the middle of the night and peeing on their clothes. Like, you're going to get a smackdown.
Yeah.
And this guy just didn't, I guess, realize what he was in for. Like he said, he didn't believe they would open fire on him, and stiff upper lip British guys proved his wrong.
Yeah. it's like a level 1 guy on an MMORPG, like going up to level 90, just completely outclassed and picking a fight,
Yeah, or it's a bit like the kid with hand crutches trying to pick a fight with like an MMA fighter. It's just no disrespect to anybody.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's probably not going to end well.
No.
You know? And that's kind of what we had here. Is we had the nerdy little dude with the pocket protector straight throwing his lunch in the bully's face and going, "What are you going to do, hit me?" And you got that right.
Getting his face wrecked.
Good job, Khalid.
So the last one I want to talk about today is the second Gulf of Tonkin incident.
That's pretty horrible.
Yeah. This was just declassified, I want to say, 10 years ago or something. There was, rumors about it, but, it was confirmed not too long ago. This is the incident that basically led to the Vietnam War.
So, the inciting incident that led to Vietnam.
Yeah. So, basically what happened is on August 2nd, 1964, the American naval destroyer, the USS Maddox, was patrolling the Gulf of Tonkin near North Vietnam. The destroyer was approached by 3 small Vietnamese torpedo boats. The Maddox fired off a round of warning shots, which were responded to with machine gun fire. They engaged in a short-lived battle, which resulted in the destruction of all 3 Vietnamese boats pretty easily. No American casualties. Then, on August 4th, there was a second incident. The USS Maddox and another destroyer, the Turner Joy, were on high alert, maneuvering around the Gulf in the middle of the night when all of a sudden their radars began to ping. The crews were convinced that they were surrounded and began to fire off hundreds of shells in all directions. They almost hit each other at one point. It turns out that they were shooting at phantoms, false radar signals. There was no attack. Despite this, it was still reported that the ships had narrowly avoided an attack, and President Lyndon B. Johnson used this incident to push through the Gulf of Tonkin resolution as justification for authorizing airstrikes and increasing troops to fight the so-called communist aggression in the area.
So you're telling me that the entire Vietnam War, which lasted over a decade, and cost the lives of over 58,000 American soldiers was predicated on a lie.
Yeah.
Wow, that's disgusting. And this just became classified, what, you said around years ago, what, 2004, 2005, something like that?
Yeah.
It's despicable, man. That is utterly despicable. That's like...
Yep.
Calling it a fail is... I think the fail to me in this story is when they're firing at the false phantom, the phantom radar signals. That's a fail. Using it as justification to start a war that changed the world for the worst. I don't think there's any arguing that.
Yeah.
No disrespect to anybody who actually fought in the conflict or had family who did.
Right.
I'm not saying that they did anything. I'm saying that the conflict itself changed history.
It really did, yeah.
And
yeah.
To use a false incident, that's...
Yeah, I mean, the current political climate is sort of because of this event,
you can see something like this absolutely happening now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you absolutely could.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, there was a bullet flew by this guy, and we got to kill everybody now. And, well, I mean, yeah, it was a bullet, or it could have been a bug, but we think it was a bullet.
Yeah.
The fail here, to me, is the fact that our government didn't declassify this for 40 years.
What really gets me is, I mean, if this is a thing, it's probably not the only thing that was covered
there's
up.
No way.
There's got to be...
And you got to think about it. If they're declassifying stuff,
yeah,
they're not declassifying everything.
Oh, yeah.
They're picking and choosing. They're cherry picking.
Well,
and there's some things that are classified for certain time. Like, I know, in a lot of cases, there's, for instance, certain battle records.
Right.
Are sealed for, 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, you won't find out about, sealed battle records from Vietnam until, 2074 or something or at least some of them.
Yeah.
So, I understand that. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand it.
But something like this.
Something like this that have changed the whole world.
Yeah.
Is, that's pretty despicable.
Well, and some people figured out later that what was happening was the radars were pinging off at the other ships.
So their proximity to each other caused the phantom signals, which
right.
The fault originally lies with the idiots who navigated those two ships so close to each other. Good grief, that is an epic fail.
So I just want to end real quick with saying there's a few honorable mentions here because there's so many dumb moments throughout history. That's really what this podcast is about. But these are topics we're going to cover in future episodes. The USS William D. Porter.
We'll be talking about the Zimmerman telegram.
The Battle of Karen Sebish.
That's a mouthful. We'll be talking about the Mongol invasions of Japan.
The Great Emu War of 1932.
That sounds so awesome. I don't know anything about it, but I know emus are very similar to ostriches. And just picture everyone riding emus in a battle. We're also going to be talking about the War for Jenkins' Ear. And,
of course, that one time that Columbus got lost looking for India and accidentally discovered Cuba, thinking he was in Japan. Next time on Epic Fails of History, we'll be talking about history's most avoidable catastrophes. Catch you next time. Thank you for listening to Epic Fails of History. Be sure to subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and check out the blog that started it all at epicfails.com. And once again, that's epic with a K. Feel free to drop me a line through Twitter or email me at ericslader@gmail.com. Erik with a K. And let me know what you think of the show. If you're a fan of the podcast and want to see it continue, you can help me out by going to patreon.com/epicfails with a K. Even $1 a month goes a long way. Thank you.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?